let's catch up on a few things we missed out on last week on how to make a collection, what you needed to get started, and we'll go from here. Well, first thing you need is a net. I always try to tell people when the kids want to get started now.
Hey George, there's no one in here yet. So maybe, we finally got somebody. We'll just go ahead and start now again. We'll just start from the beginning. Now we got 3 people.
Morning, this is George over at City Museum. We're going to talk about insect collecting today, more specifically about what you need to get started, what kind of equipment you use, and things like that. First thing, of course, is a net. You can collect a lot of things without a net, but a net is your main tool, I guess you don't want to be without. I always tell people when you're buying a net, make sure it's not one of these things you get at some of the discount stores, a little kid net. You need something that's long enough in the bag, so when you fold it over, you got a lot of bag left. This little 12-inch net, there's no extension in there, so you can't keep the stuff trapped in the net while you're trying to get it in a jar. So you get the stuff in the net, you fold it over, and maybe before you do that, you sweep it a couple times like this, so whatever's in the net is going to get forced down here to the end. Then you need a killing jar. This could be glass, it could be plastic, any size, shape. Get this, I'll tell you what to put in the killing jar in a minute. Usually I try to slide it in the net with the lid loose, take the net off, and try to close the jar around the insect with the net. Then slide the jar lid back on and slowly pull your net out. Sometimes if you tip the opening of the bottle down, insects usually try to climb up. So that'll get it away from the threads and the cap, so you won't screw your lid on and crush your insect. Now let's go back to what you use for a killing fluid. I use is ethyl acetate. That's the same stuff that comes in nail polish remover, in the nail polish itself. It's a clear, volatile liquid. You don't want to get this on your hands. The fact that it's in a nail polish and nail remover gives you an idea. It's not the worst thing in the world, but over the years you don't want to keep exposing yourself to more and more of this by skin contact. Your killing jar should have a little paper towel or napkin or something crushed and packed down in the bottom. You put a few drops, maybe depending on how hot and how long you're going to be out, 8 or 10 drops of this in there. Get the lid back on. The fewer times you open the lid and shorter amount of time it's open depends on how long this stuff's going to last. If it's a really hot day and you're catching a lot, you might have to stop halfway through the day, switch to another bottle, or add some more ethyl acetate. Most things within 5 minutes are not going to be moving around enough so they won't be getting out. So you can maybe collect 20, 30, 40 different insects in this one jar. But you don't want to put your butterflies and moths in there. They just beat themselves to death, and there'll be butterfly wing scales all over everything. Best way to catch a butterfly or moth is get it in the net, get it up in the top where the wings are folded together, and give it a slight little pinch, and that'll kind of stun it enough. You can take it out and put it in a glassine envelope like this, and then take lighter fluid. That's even safer than the ethyl acetate. Put a couple drops of that on the body of the butterfly or the moth, and that's how you can kill those easily. Blow it up. And that's for your moths and butterflies. So as you get through the day, and you got to decide too, if you're going to be out for an hour or 4 hours, how much stuff you want to carry around with you. If you're walking out 2 hours from away from the car, you got a 2-hour walk back, you're going to want something to drink. It's usually hot and dry. So you need a water bottle and a minimal amount of equipment. The more you carry, the more you got to bring back. So I like to use plastic bottles. They're a lot lighter than glass. You're not as likely to break them. Keep a couple Ziploc bags in there. Sometimes you'll find a cocoon, a chrysalis or something, some insect-related thing that you want to bring back with you. Or you have some leaves with galls on them, or some stems with galls on them. Goldenrod's is a very good plant for finding galls. Toward the end of the season in fall, you'll see something about the size of a 5/8, 3/4 inch marble on the stem of a goldenrod. There's they're flies and wasps that lay eggs on the plant. And there's an irritant in it that starts the plant to build this little gall around that insect. So it provides a place for the insect to live and protect it from any birds or anything. And it just lives in there and eats and usually overwinters. One is that round one, and another one is an elongated gall. There's two different kinds of galls you can find on goldenrod. If you bring those in the winter, put them in some kind of a little jar with a screen on top or some gauze netting. In the springtime, you get different kinds of wasps and flies. There's a large variety, even in goldenrod themselves. And it's galls that grow on trees, in oak trees, and on the stem and on the leaves. And that's a whole different branch of insect study. There are just hundreds and hundreds of different varieties. And they're the ones on the that you can bring in during the winter, you have a better chance of raising. There's a lot of them that grow on the leaves. If you pick the leaves too soon, there's not going to be enough green food for the insect to live through the winter. So there's a little trick on timing that so you get the insect before it starves to death with a dropping out leaf. So once you get your stuff home, then you've got to pin it. Insect pins come in about 5 or 6 different sizes. They start with the smallest is a 000.
Hi, Lindsay.
A 000 is about the size of a thick mustache hair, probably. If you're not careful, they're going to bend when you try to get them into some of the harder bodied insects. And when you put the labels on your insects, it's the same problem there. Sometimes they're so thin, they'll bend your pin. So you want to grab those down near the bottom. Then they go through 000, 1s, 2s, 5s. Once in a while you use a 7 if you have a really large rhinoceros beetle or something, but very rarely.
So George, the smaller the number is the smaller the pin?
Yes.
Okay.
And whenever possible, you want to use the smallest pin you can. If you don't want to crack the insect in half.
So the smaller the pin is the best pin to go.
Just obliterate it with some oxy pin. The beetles and bees, wasps, they're real easy to pin. They've got relatively sturdy, hard bodies. For beetles, for example, you want to pin the insect on the right side of the wing cover, on the right, the elytra, on the right, up near the top of that, in that direction. That way they can be seen from the side, the bottom, and if there's some center marks on the insects that you use for identification, you're not obliterating that with hitting dead center on your pin. Moths and butterflies, on the other hand, they get pinned. Let's say 99% of people, they pin them straight through the center of the thorax. So the thorax is the middle body part. It's going to show us the easiest here.
Hey, April. Glad you're tuning in from Arkansas.
So the pin goes right through the middle of the thorax there, in the middle of the body. And then you need a spreading board. And this again decides how much you want to invest in equipment or how much you want to make on your own. If you make them on your own, it's a pretty simple board. This board is a real soft balsa wood, or the softest balsa wood you can find. You want to use that for the center where the pin goes through and holds the insect. Then you have some boards on the side. They have just a couple degrees slant on them, just to give it a little elevation there. There's a tendency for the wings to sag over time. So if you get that couple of degree raise, they look a lot better. So you take the butterfly on there, in this case a dragonfly. You take another small pin, once you get them centered, and use that pin, where's my pin? Here we go. Use that pin to drag the wings up into position. On the butterflies, you want to drag the top wing up so that the bottom edge of that wing is at a 90 to the body of the insect. Some people are so good at they just drag that up there and put a pin behind it. 90% of the time, people just get a tiny little pin and just go ahead and stick it through the wing to hold it on position on the board. Then you take the bottom wing, you pull that up to where it just, let's go look at a butterfly. So it just slides under the top wing, but not so much that it hides too much.
I'll beat you over there.
Okay. That's a big one, it's easy to see.
Hey, Tracy. I'll tell George you said hey. Tracy Laricha says hi. She's glad to see you're doing well.
Great, thanks. So the top wing, the bottom edge of that top wing is at a 90 to the body. Then you pull the bottom wing up to where there's probably no rule, but you want to get as much detail and much of the wing visible without sliding it too far underneath there. Some people use tracing paper to put on top of the wings and to keep them flat and curling up while they're drying. A lot of times I use a little piece of glass with a little stub of wood for a handle. I'll lay that down on top of the wing and weight it down that way. That way I think it's easier to see if the wings are lined up perfectly from left to right. Some people are so good they don't need any extra help there. What I like to do too is glue some graph paper to the pinning boards. I get one sheet, go straight across the board, glue it on there, and then slice out the center where the body of the insect goes. That way you can use the lines in the graph paper to see that your wings are coming up at the right distance from left to right. So we briefly talked about the beetles and the bees and wasps. Most museums are not going to spend a lot of time rearranging the legs on an insect. It just takes too long. They don't have time for that. They're looking at a different kind of collection than I am. I wanted a collection here that would show people all the details of these insects. There's a nice beetle. See all the little spurs and hooks on his legs? So once you get him pinned on a flat board like this, a flat piece of foam, use more pins to straighten out the legs. And if they don't stay in position, stick a pin on one side or the other to keep the leg there until it dries. Some beetles, it's easier than others. You can get the antenna straightened out. So it gives you an idea how long the antennas are. As a rule, most beetles, for example, the males have a longer antenna than the females. You should go look at some of the woodburn beetles. They call them longhorn beetles for that reason. The antennas are really long, sometimes twice as long as the body. Yeah, look at that. That's beautiful. Now in a museum, they'd be horrified at that kind of amount because you really have to be careful. It takes up too much space, and if you're not careful, you're going to break the antenna off. Like I said, we're looking at a little different idea of how to display stuff here, so I'm going to take that chance and be careful. So these are all cerambycid woodburn beetles. They're longhorn beetles. There's another woodburn beetle called the buprestids. They're a lot of metallic, they're smaller beetles usually, and they're metallic colors. Talking about beetles. These are all tiger beetles. They live and nest in the ground. And they lay their eggs. The immature beetle will dig a little tunnel in the ground, and he's got very strong jaws. They'll wait, and anything that walks by, they'll grab and drag into the little tunnel and eat it. That's how they live the first part of their lives. And this green one here, that's one of the most common you'll see in the forest out in Missouri. By the time you get real close, we're going to look at it and get a picture. They take off another 5 or 10 foot down the path. But they're some of the more attractive beetles we got in Missouri. The same way with flies, wasps and bees. Ever pop up, you can get the wings, you can see the wings, you get the antennas, you can see the legs. And some of the wasps and bees, if you really got the time, you want to open up the jaws so you can see the jaws that they have. That's how they grab and capture when they get for example, the ground nesting wasps. They've usually got some pretty sharp jaws. They'll drag caterpillars back into a burrow and bury it and lay their eggs on there. So they've got some pretty good, well-developed jaws and pinchers on those. Most things, in about a week, they're going to be dry enough. You can take them off the pinning board. And then you've got to figure out how you're going to keep these things safe. Like I mentioned last week, there's a little beetle the size of a sesame seed called a domestic beetle. If you see powder in your collection, you know you've got beetles in there, and if you don't do something about it, you'll find nothing but dust and pins in your box. You start off with something like this. Any box that's about 2 inches deep, got a snug lid. Put a little piece of foam in the bottom, and you put your collection in there. But this isn't going to protect it. If you get a few boxes like this, you can give it a little extra protection. Get some mothballs or something in there, and maybe put all the boxes in 1 or 2 big plastic bags and seal it as tight as you can. If you decide you want to make the next step up in investing in equipment, then you want to start buying the factory-made insect drawers. The ones on the wall I made years ago when I had a library, and those were underneath the bookshelves. They were made to fit the bookshelf. But they're standard sizes that the commercial supply houses sell. They're California boxes, they have Cornell boxes. I think there's maybe 3 different sizes that different museums in the U.S. and around the world use. So if you're going to go to that length, decide which one you're going to use, and then stick with it, because you don't want to have 2 different size boxes all of a sudden trying to keep your collection in. You can buy I think the Cornell box. You can buy those in sets of 6, and you can assemble them yourselves. You just have to buy the sheet of glass and glue it in the frames. So if you're got a lot of time and you're handy, you can save a lot of money that way, because the finished box, it's varnished and everything. I think it's up to around $40-some now, $45. So they're not cheap, but the good thing is they'll last forever. Your collection's gonna be a lot safer. I thought when I was a kid I could put them in cigar boxes and cookie tins. That's why everything I had from when I was a kid is gone. Beatles got in there, and that's history.
Does anybody have any questions for George? If not, we'll just keep going.
Okay. And I forgot one of the most important things. I didn't start doing this right away, but you should always label what you have. And the label, there's different types of labels. The very basic label should show the state, Missouri, the county, some kind of location. This one I made for the museum, 16th and Delmar. And here, since I collected a lot of miscellaneous stuff at different times of the year, I just leave the date blank and I'll write that in later. And it's got the name of the collector, and that's a number 4 font. I've been lucky to have people that can take care of that part with me, because I'd never be able to figure it out. So you get your labels made. They go on the pin underneath the insect. You try to put the insect on the pin so that you have about 3/8 of an inch on top of the pin, so you can grab the insect without breaking body parts off of it. When you put your label on there, you get these little pinning blocks made. You can make them yourself. That sets the depth of the pin, so all your labels in that box will come out at the same height. Makes your collection look a lot neater. And that's just good practice. You never know what something you catch. Might be something rare. It could be a new state record. But if there's no label on it, whoever discovers that and identifies it years from now, they can't say much or do much about it, because they have no clue where and when it came from. Well, we got the pinning block here. I talked about those little points, the stuff that is too small to put a pin through. That's another different depth here. When you punch out those little points and set them with a pin in, that sets the height of that point so that they're all the same.
George, Tracy asks, are you still collecting?
Yes. I got out Tuesday.
He went out Tuesday.
Great day Tuesday. Let me get some of these points. So your pinning block, that's how you set the depth of your point. The real small ones you want to glue on a point. And then your setting block also sets the height of your label. So you got a nice little, like I said, makes everything look consistent and a lot neater collection. Yeah, Tuesday there's a lot of stuff flying around. It's a great day.
Hey George, Sandy asks, how many years have you been collecting? Also, is most of the collection in this room yours? Hey Sandy, I can answer that one for you. Yeah, everything in this room is George's collection. But how many years?
60.
60 years, Sandy. And then, what did you find on Tuesday, George?
A lot of bees, more than anything. A couple flies, a lot of bees. There were anything that's flowering at this time of year is going to have bees on it. Another thing you should learn if you're going to be an insect collector is a little bit of botany. Because the first thing somebody asked me when I said I got to be here, he said, "What was it on? What was the flower it was on?" There's a little white flower in the ground. That's all I can tell you right now. Talked last week about some bamboo nesting pieces you put up. Saturday or Sunday, I put some bamboo bundles down on my porch. We got a ornamental cherry, There's a red bud, and what's the other? Anyway, so that was on the weekend. By Wednesday, the bees are using those bamboo nesting sites. Some bees like to nest in cavities, other bees will nest in the ground. So if there's a little bare ground, it should be a cold, it shouldn't be a wet spot because they're going to be in the ground all winter. So something that's relatively well drained. So they found that bamboo 2 or 3 days after I put it up, and they were already nesting in there. They'll pack the cavities in there with pollen, lay their egg in there, and they'll seal up that little cavity. And sometimes they'll put 4 or 5 or 6 bees in a row in the same tube of bamboo. And I asked Mike, the bee expert in Missouri, one time, I said, how do they hatch out so that the guy, the first one in there, doesn't go chewing through the others to get out? And somehow they have some, I guess, timing thing worked out. It doesn't happen. They all get out of there at the right time. They don't bunch up and have a traffic jam, and they get out when they're supposed to.
Angelina has a question. Do you ever decide to leave an insect you find instead of keeping it because it is rare or endangered?
Sometimes. Or sometimes I just won't pick it up because I've got plenty of them. Stuff as far as being rare and endangered, there's very few of those. One time I was on vacation in Florida, and I was hunting, collecting, of course. Everybody else was at the beach. I don't like sand or water, so I had to do something. So I went there in this little wooded area, and I hear this noise, it's rustling, and I look, and there's 2 burying beetles dragging a little dead snake through the weeds. I guess they had a burrow somewhere. They're trying to get this little snake back to its nest. I just heard about the American burying beetle a year or 2 before that. That's definitely rare and endangered, and that's a federally protected species. So I wasn't just looking at it like that. I hadn't seen either one before, so I was afraid that might have been an American burying beetle. So I let it go. And then later on, when I checked it out, it wasn't. So I missed an opportunity. But if it's something like that, yeah, if it's questionable, I'm gonna let it go.
So you're a responsible harvester.
Yes.
That's good to hear.
And to see as many insects as are in this collection area, the chance of anything being exterminated by a collector is slim and none. Years ago, there was a case out in California. There was a little blue butterfly. I mean, not even as big as a postage stamp, I guess. And that was a very rare butterfly. It had a very limited range, and some guys got out there and collected, and they knew it was rare, but they wanted to make sure they got up everyone they could. So something like that, you could literally wipe out one of those rare populations. It happens, but around here in Missouri, it's very unlikely.
Adam Christopher asks, what is the rarest, he says ones, but I guess bugs in your collection? It's probably that one we showed last time, isn't it?
That metallic bee?
Yeah, the metallic bee.
Yeah. And maybe it's not, maybe in Ecuador this isn't rare at all. But the only one I saw on that, it's a 10 or 12 day trip. So, looked pretty rare to me. They are, I found a couple state records years ago. But if I wasn't lucky enough to know someone that can identify the bees for me, I'd have no clue. That could sit around in a collection for 20 years until somebody stumbled across it. There's probably rare things out there, but if you don't have somebody to identify the stuff, you'd never know it. For example, when I was a kid, I thought, there's guys collecting bees and wasps and flies and grasshoppers all over the place. And I come to find out, there's not. I've been, like in 60 years, I've rarely run into anybody. Just, probably once. I was out collecting with Mike, we were down in southern Missouri, and we ran into 2 guys we knew from St. Louis. They were down there in the same weekend we ran into. But you're just not going to be bumping into people with butterfly nets, you know.
Sandy asks, how many insects are in your collection?
Yeah, I should find that out. It comes up a lot, and I don't know. The little points that I use for the tiny things here, I use the number 3 pin for those. So years ago, I bought 10,000 of those pins, and about 3 years ago, they ran out.
So you're thinking 10,000 plus.
Oh, that's just that one size pin.
That's just that one size pin. Okay, gotcha.
I'm guessing somewhere in the 25 to 30,000 range.
25 to 30,000. That's a lot of bugs, George.
Not enough. Some people that weren't here last week, I mentioned In Missouri alone, there are over 400 different bees. And here's a good example right here. The chances of me finding all of those 400 bees is very remote. These are all 19 different megachilus. Those are the leafcutter bees. If you see a redbud tree that's got little, looks like somebody took a hole punch out there and punched little sections off the leaf, or rose petals. These insects are cavity nesters. They'll line their nest with those leaves, put their pollen and their egg in there, and then seal it up with another little plug of the leaves. So there's at least 19 that I have, and I'm sure that's only half of what's in Missouri. There are, the leafcutters also have their own parasite. I don't think I have one here. But the megachilus also have a megachilus that is in the same group, but it's a parasite of the other megachilus. It'll let them put the nest and fill it with pollen, and then they'll lay their egg in that nest. I think Mike said that probably 20% of the bees in Missouri are parasitic. Seems to be a real high number.
So 1 out of every 5 bees is a parasitic bee?
About, yeah.
That's wild.
1 out of 8. Yeah.
1 out of 8.
Something like that. And of course, I mentioned last week that cottonwood borer, that's not a rare insect, but I don't have one. Drives me nuts. Maybe this should be my goal this summer.
Yeah, there you go. A cottonwood borer?
I go live around some cottonwood trees, camp out, and I'm trying to find one. I hope. Here's just some people asked last week about what they need to get started. Here's an example of some of the, let's find a place to dump this out. Any kind of jar, test tube, vial, anything that's close to the right size and shape will work. These are glass test tubes, plastic test tubes, a glass jar. These are the little envelopes for the moths and butterflies. Sometimes we want to collect aquatic insects. A little eyedropper is good because they're so small, you can just suck them up in an eyedropper and shoot them in a little tube. Here's some little centrifuge tubes. You want to collect things like single mosquito larvae, it's good for that. Some tiny flies, you put 1 inch in there. And the flies are very delicate in the sense a lot of them have bristles and hairs all over them. So if you throw them in with a bunch of bees and wasps, all these little bristles and hairs are going to get broken off. And when you get to that level, then you want that stuff on the fly so you can identify it. Which brings up a real problem. There are field guides all over the place. There are field guides for butterflies and moths. This is probably the first one I ever got when I was a kid. That is a great starter book. They still publish it. Shows everything in there you've probably got a good chance of finding and collecting. But when you get to the flies, they're going to have a few flies in these generic field guides, but there's no field guide to the flies. I just happened to find one that's the flower flies. And it covers, I think, what do you see? It's got 3,000 pictures of flower flies, so it's strictly a flower fly book. That's really rare. Problem is, a lot of people would buy a butterfly and moth book, but not many people care about flies enough that they're going to spend $20 or sometimes $50.
Poor Diptera.
Yeah. This is a great book. Came out a couple years ago. This has got, I forget how many thousand, 4,000 photographs.
And it's ladybugs or all bugs?
Everything.
Oh, everything.
Yeah. So they do a good job of all the orders, great pictures, and that's still just a drop in the bucket. Somebody asked about ladybugs last week. I said there's got to be at least 40 in Missouri. Maybe there's 80. There's a lot more ladybugs than you would think.
Hey, Katie says that was her first book too.
This one?
No, the your first book. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
It brings up a good point. When people are getting started, go to every book fair, library sale, yard sale. You find a lot of stuff at sales like that. And like these, you can find these for a quarter, 50 cents, or $1. I try to pick them up whenever I can. They come in handy for field trips or science classes. And this one's strictly beetles. This guy has done, forget how many beetles he's got. But this is just an unbelievable field guide of the beetles. Great color photographs. They talk about how many are in each family. how you collect them, where you find them. So this is a fantastic book.
Hey, Katie asks, do you keep aquatic insects in liquid to preserve them?
Yes. Good.
Katie, that was a good question.
Glad I got those yesterday, so I didn't have one for it. There are, we got any lizards, beetles. Those aren't aquatic insects, those are beetle larvae. This is another. People raise lizards, use mealworms. This is one of the mealworms that's about to turn into an adult. As a, that's really one of the largest. I bet I didn't bring all the. But yes, I got some mayfly larvae, a couple of those, dragonfly larvae, and damselfly larvae. But I didn't grab the right. Okay, here we go. Here's one. That came on one of our field trips over to Suisun Park.
And what is that again?
You probably know more about that than I do.
Oh, is that a damselfly?
Damselfly or a stone? That wouldn't be a stonefly.
Oh, a stone nymph? Huh? Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Trout fisher, so he knows. Yeah, I didn't bring a lot of those this time, but yes, whenever I can. Every year we go to Suisun Park with middle grade science classes, and that's what I'm doing. Is strictly aquatic insects there. So we grab up some scoops and stuff out of the bottom of the pond. There's leaves and mud and everything. And invariably the kids are sitting there picking at it with a spoon. There's nothing in here, and you got to go over there and show them. The big hit are leeches. They love it when they find a leech in it.
My goal is to find a Helgermite this year.
Speaking of that, let's look at the adults on that. That's a Dobson fly, right?
Yep.
Anyway, those are the Dobson fly the CD was just talking about. Somewhere there's got to be an adult. The adult males have this giant pinchers, sometimes a ½ inch long, and they look like they're really dangerous. They can't do anything with those pinchers. Whereas the females just have a set of jaws. Those can bite. It's always one I can't find here. Oh, here we go. Here's finally good. You get up there. There's a male and female.
The male is on the left, and see his big pinchers, and the female is on the right.
There's a couple of hemiptera. They live on milkweed. So they have that red, orange, and black coloration. That's always a danger sign to animals that they're toxic or dangerous. Same with black and yellow from the yellow jackets and different wasps. So these hemiptera, they have incomplete metamorphosis. So when the eggs are laid and they hatch, they're a miniature of the adults. There's a little one in there, it's barely an 1/8 inch long. And they just gradually grow until they become adults. There's no pupal stage like a beetle or a moth or a butterfly. Somewhere I have some mites that came off a bat. Every year we find, okay, they're in here. Probably not going to be able to see them. There's little white dots in this alcohol. Those are mites that I found on a bat that was found on the sidewalk somewhere around the building one year. And the poor guy was just infested with mites so much that I took a little paintbrush and alcohol and brushed them off as much as I could.
Yeah, I got him in focus for like 3 seconds. Hi, Lori. How are you and Marv doing? Hope you're doing well.
Give you the size of those mites. You set one on this box and put a period from a sentence on there and it disappears. They're really small.
Anybody out there have any questions? Me and George are here for you if you have questions.
And this is a good container to take with you in the field. You put your moths, butterflies, and dragonflies in envelopes. You need a little flat case to keep them from getting crushed while you're walking around all day. So that protects them, keeps it airtight. This is the kind of thing you run into once in a while on a tree. That's an old silk cocoon from some kind of a moth. If it's a silk cocoon, that's going to be a moth as opposed to a butterfly. Butterflies are more likely to, well, I guess almost always have a shiny, hard chrysalis. Or if it's something woven out of silk, then it's going to be a moth. Wide mouth jars are always nice to have around. And, one thing I forgot to mention about pinning, ideally you should pin the stuff the same day when you get home. You can keep it a couple days, sometimes even 3 or 4, but it's so much easier to get everything pinned when it's fresh and flexible. If you happen to get stuff like this now, this is all dried out, so I'm going to have this all relaxed and softened up before I can pin it. So you put this in another Tupperware or glass container, get something absorbent like paper, paper towels, something in the bottom, put some water in there. It's always a good idea too, maybe crush some mothballs, because while you're softening these things, you don't want the mold to build up in there. So you want the mothballs to keep the mold. And it'll work, but it's so much easier if you do it the same day. Everything's just real nice and flexible. Here's another example, all with different kind of size jars, vials. You never have too many jars of things. And another reason you want to carry a lot of them with you, sometimes you'll find a pair of beetles mating or a pair of flies mating. You want to keep a pair together, so you pin them together. That way you're sure you've got a male and female. Here's another little tool. Sometimes you'll be at this flower, you'll find some little flies or something on that flower, and they're literally the size of a period on a sentence. Or if you shake them in your net, some are so small they're going to go right through the net material, or they'll get in there and you never find them again. So this thing acts like a little vacuum sweeper. You suck into the tube, it pulls it in the tube, shoots it into your test tube or plastic jar. There's a little screen there so you're not swallowing the things.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, it helps. I don't think we talked about magnifying glasses yet. At some point you're going to realize that some of these beetles are the size of a piece of rice. So if you've got a magnifying glass, you can see all the details on them. The antennas, the little bristles on their body, the segments in the antenna. So you can start off with a simple magnifying glass. And the next step up, this is a 10 power, nicer quality because it's glass. And then eventually, you're probably going to want, if you get serious about this, you want a microscope. And before everybody runs out and buys one of these little microscope kits, you don't need a 900 power microscope for insects. Something between 20 and 50 or 60 is probably more than enough that you'll ever want. What happens even at 20 power or something, or 30, you're trying to get the insect in focus. Let's take this beetle. And you want to see the antenna. Well, the antenna will be in focus, but the rest of the body is going to be a blur. That's how sensitive this is, where you can't get everything in focus. The lower the magnification, the more chance you're going to have getting everything in focus at once. A lot of these pictures are some great pictures taken in the field. But some guys will get stuff in the lab, they clean it and airbrush it, literally. No, airbrush, I mean dry it so it's all clean, there's no pollen on the bees. And they'll take these pictures, and they have a computer program now where the camera will take a series of maybe 200 photographs at different focus levels, and stack them all together, and they get one perfectly magnified picture of that insect. There's a guy who does this with bees. You're looking at it, they're beautiful, but with the lighting and the iridescence on them, they're almost unrecognizable. You know, if I can recognize what kind of bee this is to a certain extent, but when they get that clean and fluffed and dried, you can't tell what they are. They're pieces of art.
That's amazing.
Really nice.
So do you have any other tips, I guess, for people starting out and collecting bugs? I know we've been kind of going through this, and if anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask them, guys.
And these you can find, these are dissecting scopes. So these you can find, there's a kid's model that starts at $50, then there's some that even for $100 are pretty decent. And just used ones you can find every now and then. You don't have to spend $500 on a scope. And same with books, you go to used book sites. That's one thing the internet has done. Used book prices have just crashed. I mean, there's stuff I bought 30 years ago. It's like, I must have rocks in my head. The last one in North America, and you find out they're everywhere. Starting at 99 cents, stuff like that. So keep your eyes open for used stuff. There's plenty of it out there, and it's real nice to have some field guides to show you what you're catching. So, what else is collecting? How are we doing there? Let me show you a few things here. Years ago, there's an insect collector in Kirkwood or Webster. He had died, and I guess years later they were cleaning out the house. I don't know if it was just how it came about. They had some slides of his from back in the 1910s to the 40s. And they wanted to make sure they didn't disappear, get dumped in the trash. So I said I'd take care of them. This guy's name was E.P. Miners. He was a physician, but he was a very, as they described it in his biography, or bio, he was a very accomplished amateur entomologist. So I just think some of these slides are fantastic. This is slides he made. These are in the 1940s. This is a lice, a different lice he found. This one's on a hog. This was a Norway rat. There's a little dot in there about the size of half a period again. These are some of my favorites. The host human. Another one, a bigger one, host human, a louse. This came from the Washington, D.C. City Jail in 1943. So it was, you got this guy, W.M. Gordon. He collected the stuff and got it to miners. And I don't know how he happened to be in these different places sending this stuff to miners. But it's a great little piece of history there. These are fleas. That's one he found in a yard in Texas. This is on a jackrabbit. These are on sand, a dog, a shrew, a cottontail, and a mole. This, I wish I could find out more about this Gordon guy, because he really covered some ground and came up with some great stuff to send over to miners. And he did a beautiful job of mounting this stuff, because like I said, this is 80 years old in some cases, or 100 years old. And it's still great. Here's a little fly from St. Louis, Missouri from 1920. Here's part of a mouthpiece of a beetle. More mouthpiece from locusts, grasshoppers. Here's a couple aphids from 1920. One was on a goldenrod, one was on a geranium. And what do we got here? Some more, oh, these are mites. So I mentioned I had some mites in the bat. Here's one he found on a yarrow. There's a couple little ones here. They're like a small dot in a period. These are under bark in a tree somewhere, Creve Coeur Lake. So it's neat as it is to see the insects, just the fact that they're all documented, where they came from and when. It's really a nice touch.
Tracy asked, what should be the first few things you buy to start a collection? I guess we'll go over that real quick again.
Yeah, the net.
A net is number one.
You can make your net or you can buy one.
George made his out of a Febreze handle, or a Swiffer handle.
Yeah. Nice thing about that, a lot of times when a short net, that's fine. When I went to Ecuador, I had a 12-inch handle net. I think 80 or 90% of everything I caught was with that short net. But sometimes you got something in a tree, so you can lengthen and shorten these depending on where you're at and what you're looking for. This is a paint strainer for a 5-gallon bucket. And to get a longer bag on there, that's an old piece of cloth I sewed in a bag. To get an
Is it like a pillowcase or something?
Yeah.
Is it? So you need a net.
The jars, you can buy jars. That's another thing to look at flea markets and yard sales.
Couple jars, some envelopes for your butterflies and your moths.
There's a place called BioQuip out in California. They specialize in, if there's an entomology related item, they've got it. That's where we got the drawers. That's where I buy the pins. And pins, most everything else you can find, Tupperware, everything else. Pins you're gonna have to buy, because the insect pins have to be a lot thinner than the normal pin. You want them longer than the normal pin, so you can get your label, your insect, and get them pinned on a foam board. Tweezers are always nice to have. When you dump out your killing jar, Sometimes it's easier to just grab it by the whatever you're trying to pin by the leg or the wing, so you don't squash it or rub some scales off of it. These were at a flea market years ago. I bought hundreds and thousands of those. Test tubes. These are little plastic cups to snap on lids. That's a good way if you're out in the field someday. When you get back to the car, you can dump everything from that location into one of these, put a name on it, and you use your killing jars for something else. The ethyl acetate is moderately difficult to come across. I remember years ago I was trying to buy some and I realized it was getting more expensive, it was getting tougher to find, so none of it will load up. So I called the place and they had it all ready for me. I was getting ready to pick it up and they called me back and said, "What are you using this for?" I said, "Insect collecting, entomology. We can't sell it to you." I said, "Really?" So I called up another place and I said, "What are you using?" Thinning paint and cleanup. I got my ethyl acetate. So that was probably 15 years ago, so it's probably even worse now.
Is there an alternative you can use?
Well, some people drop this stuff in alcohol.
Alcohol, like a high percentage of isopropyl. Okay.
For things like beetles and different things, that's great. But the bees, a lot of bees, that's how you can tell a bee from a wasp a lot of times. The bees have a lot of fine hairs all over the body where the wasps aren't. So you dip a bee in alcohol and you see this big clotted, matted mess. You can blow dry them out and everything, but it takes forever and it's never quite the same. So you want to try to avoid that. There's probably some, I haven't checked into what BioEquip's selling these days, but if somebody absolutely positively can't find anything, let me know and I'll get you something.
There you go, guys.
A lot of times I give these little starter bags that I dumped out over there to kids, and I'll tell the parents, I'll tell them what the story is on this, so they can either put it in the jar for the kids so the kids aren't handling it. I don't want to be responsible for it. You start off like so, small magnifying glasses are always nice to have. And
all right, guys, we're gonna go keep this going for another 5 or so minutes. If you guys were watching the whole time or even half the time, and you and this is for the kids out there, if you guys want to respond in the comments your favorite 5 facts and maybe a fact for us to know or something to look forward to, go ahead and respond to the comments with 5 facts, and me and George later will randomly pick one winner. Somebody will win some tickets.
Is there a way, this is a question for you, is there a way you can put my phone number down on this?
Yeah, we can get that figured out.
Do that.
Yeah.
A couple of people last week wanted some things,
And if there's any kids out there watching this and want to get more information or how to get started, we'll go ahead and just leave your name in the comments, and we'll go ahead and get in contact and we'll let you know how you can talk to George.
Yeah. One last thing
Go for it.
One thing I forgot last week was honeybees. Everybody knows what the honeybee is. And a lot of people probably heard they're in a lot of trouble the last couple of decades with colony collapse. They don't know, there's a lot of people working on this because honeybee is very important. If there weren't honeybees, there wouldn't be almonds in California. They have to pollinate the plants out there. So as colony collapse, like I said, it could be, there's a little mite that gets in the hive and weakens the honeybees and brings in viruses and bacteria. Then you have people spraying their fields with pesticides. They don't want any insects on the plants and the trees. And if you look at the internet on a almond plantation, there's nothing growing under the trees. They don't want any plants there because they don't want anything stealing the water. Water is very hard to get in California and expensive. So they're probably spraying a pesticide on the ground to keep anything else from stealing that water. Then a lot of plants, they have to spray a fungicide on there. Different insects will carry some kind of a fungus or leaf mold. That's another problem. So they'll be spraying a fungicide. So it's 3 basic chemicals they're spraying around. None of those are good for the honeybees. Then on top of that, to get to the almond trees, the beehives are trucked in on tractor trailers and dropped off all through the fields. These big plantations, when you look, you see nothing but almond trees in all directions. There are no houses, there are no roads, there's nothing but almond trees. So these bees are dragged across the country, they're dumped off there for a couple of weeks because they've got to be there when the almond trees are blooming to pollinate everything. Then after this, they get packed up and they send them up to Washington State to do the apple season. So imagine if you were I don't know, had some kind of a job. Maybe you're looking envelopes and they trucked you into St. Louis and everybody got out for 2 weeks. You looked at envelopes, put stamps on them. Then they slid you back in a little sonotube on a truck and drug you off to another state. After a couple months of that, you'd be pretty stressed out and worn out. So that's another thing that's got to be a factor in the honeybee hide collapse. And when you talk about honeybees, the first thing I should mention, they're not U.S. Native or North American bees. They all came from Europe, and they were brought over here when the Europeans moved over to North America. They wanted honeybees because they liked the honey. So that's how they spread across the country. And now so many industries are dependent on them that we can't live without. And they're not only European, so they're not native, they're also one variety of a honeybee. I believe it's an Italian honeybee. They like that one because it's docile, you can work with the hives and get the honey out, they produce a lot of honey. If history shows us anything, when you're depending on one thing, whether it's a tree or a bird or whatever, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And this is what's happened with the honeybee population. I'm certainly not a geneticist or a DNA expert or anything, but I told a friend of mine once, I wonder if this is just if this is getting to be a case of inbreeding. You know, if they're not getting enough wild bee DNA in this population. Everything's so focused on this one bee. And if it's not that, what about if they're just hitting an evolutionary dead end? You know, eons ago, there was a little thing that lived underwater called a trilobite. And it started out and then it started diversifying until it became hundreds of different varieties. And it lasted for 270 million years. But eventually, through different geological changes, disasters, the last trilobites died out. They tried adapting numerous times and finally they just ran out of evolutionary bullets and they're gone. Maybe that's what's happening, one of the things that's happening to the honeybees. So this has made a lot of interest in native bees. Native bees have been here. A lot of the plants that are here, the native bees like. If you, some of the nursery stock that's coming in, it's got all kinds of wild colors and they're hybrids and that. They don't have the pollen that would feed a bee of any kind, much less a honeybee. So there's a lot of interest in making sure we do something to build up the populations of native bees. There's very few plants that survive without bees. So like I mentioned, some bees are ground nesters. So you want to find some place sometimes, maybe just leave a bare spot in the ground. It should be well drained, maybe a tiny bit of sand mixed in it. You don't have to get that specific, but if you keep some plants up there, they'll find the ground. When I first went out this spring, there was a place in an open woodland without a lot of tree cover. There were literally hundreds of bees patrolling the emerging nests from the ground. And I talked about the cavity nesting bees. A lot of people buy these bee houses. They're literally just boxes full of bamboo sticks. And the bees find those and nest in those. And then the other thing that helps all these native bees is having the right kind of food. When the apple trees and the peaches and everything bloom in the early spring, they need food all through the year. So when this blossom disappears, there's something else blooming. And since they're native bees, they're interested in native plants. In the fall, you see the goldenrod, the sunflowers, asters. So there's a whole procession through the year of different plants that are going to keep these bees alive. There's bees that specialize in pumpkins and squash. There's the tomatoes are not going to survive without. I think there's actually a greenhouse bumblebee now that pollinates tomato plants. So there's a lot of interest. People are spending a lot of time and money studying this problem and taking surveys, finding what's here, what kind of flowers it lives on. So the farms, it used to be you drive along the road, there was a section between the road and the field where the fence was. There were weeds, there were flowers, trees, everything in there. All these things provided shelter, food for the native bees. Well, now everybody's planting right up to the edge, everything else being cut down and mowed and poisoned because they don't want to waste any water on something that's not going to be part of the crop. So there's a lot of things we can do to make bee habitat a lot more attractive to bees. And they'll be able to help out with a lot of things that the honeybees are doing. We're depending on honeybees now.
Any parting words, George? Got anything for anybody before we head out?
No, get ready and get your stuff going, 'cause the season is upon us. We got a little break here for a couple days, but
So if you guys have any questions for George, go ahead and just leave them in the comments or send the City Museum an email. Or
yeah, like I said, you give them the phone number.
Yep.
So I was like, and I won't be able to call everybody back the same day, but I'll make sure I get back to you.
yeah, George is out there if you need help getting a collecting kit started. He's a good resource for that. Go ahead and utilize him. And we hope everybody's staying safe and staying healthy. And enjoy your day. And we'll see everybody soon.
Thanks a lot.
Yep, see you guys. Everybody have a good one.